Hey guys, it's Danny. Today is the 31st of January. It's coming to an end, winter, yay! I cannot say I'm not happy. I cannot wait for spring actually. But it's time to check out what orchids we had in bloom this month, because we did have quite a few. So we'll start with the orchids that we had in full bloom, and then we'll go to the recent purchases this month. And let's start with this corner right here. First of all, we have the Aerangus citrata in bloom. This is the very first Aerangus that I ever see in bloom. It is really beautiful, and I actually took a picture with the flashlight to show you the colors better. In reality, this orchid is a little bit buttery, greenish, light greenish, and it has a white center. The photo with the flash pretty much shows this green, but in reality is not that visible. Nonetheless, the flowers are not completely white. So I do like the little flowers. It's a pity they're not fragrant. This orchid is not fragrant for a lot of people. Nonetheless, I'm very excited to see this orchid bloom in the future. The flower display is pretty neat this year, but this orchid can do much better. It can produce long, pendant flower spikes full of tiny little flowers. For now, I'm pretty happy with the display. I have this orchid for 3 months only, so I'm not complaining. I'm starting to really like Aerangus, and I'm hoping to expand the collection of Aerangus in the future. Alrighty, next to it we have the Oncidessa Coluduan Chameleon Golden Oriole. If I manage to mess up this name, you'll have it on the screen or in the description below, better yet. So this is an Oncidium type orchid, and I have to say I love it. It is shedding its flowers now, but it had a multitude of flowers and the flower spike was pretty great. It had a few branches, the flowers opened really nicely, and they were really fragrant. This orchid is actually quite fragrant. It doesn't fill up a room, so you will not get headaches from this orchid, but to me it reminds of some candy, some sweets. It smells really beautiful, and the colors of the blooms are quite pretty as well. They're not very flashy and very striking, but the flower display itself is really beautiful and compensates for, let's say, the vividness of the colors. The yellow is not pale in any way, but it's not very vivid, and those red spots that you see really are not vivid. They're more, let's say, maroony red than anything else. So the showiness of the colors, not so great. The fragrance though is beautiful, and the display itself with the pendant spike is beautiful, so that kind of compensates. This is such a vigorous grower for me. It always bloomed no matter what. It always produced nice and decent sized pseudobulbs, no matter how much stress it went through. So I do believe this is a pretty good hybrid, pretty vigorous hybrid, and if you ever see it, I do suggest you give it a go, particularly if you're a beginner and you're just starting out with Oncidiums. It does enjoy its water though, so don't let this orchid go bone dry or keep it dry for extended periods of time, because she will not like it. The next orchid we had in bloom was the Cycnodes Jumbo Puff, and I know you're supposed to say jumbo, but it's a mixture of languages here. I don't know, I find jumbo a little bit better. But yeah, Jumbo Puff. This is a Catasetum orchid very similar in shape and in flowers with the Cycnodes Wine Delight, but of course with a different color. The flowers are really beautiful. They have a very vivid yellow color on the lip and a greenish kind of yellow on the petals. If you look at the flowers from my profile, they do remind of a bird in flight, so that adds up to the appeal. Also, this orchid is fragrant, and to my surprise, it smells quite lovely. I would still consider it a sort of artificial scent, but certainly it's not that medicinal syrup pharmacy smell that the Cycnodes Wine Delight has. So if you're offended by that smell, this one might be more to your liking. It is sweet, reminds me of vanilla, but a sort of weird artificial vanilla fragrance. And I've also discovered that this orchid smells a lot more in bright light, particularly if some sunshine hits the flowers. When it first opened for about 5 or 6 days, it smelled like nothing, and I was really disappointed. But then I did some research and I moved it to a bright light location, one that receives bright sunshine in the morning, and behold, the fragrance was released. So with this orchid, if you have it and it doesn't have a fragrance for you, just move it to morning direct sun, and maybe that will help it release its fragrance. Other than that, easy grower, pretty massive orchid like most Catasetum type orchids, but the bloom display is beautiful, and of course the fragrance is beautiful as well. The next orchid we had in bloom is the Calea Hawaiian Splash Leia, one of my oldest Caleas actually. It's not the very first Calea that I ever owned, which I still have, but it is one of my favorites. I think I have it for almost 4 years already, and it always bloomed year after year. Such an easy grower, such an easy bloomer. It is a mini Cattleya, stays pretty compact. It doesn't create very massive leaves or pseudobulbs, unifoliate, and the flowers are really pretty. Now, they don't have any fragrance, I have to say, but they are really showy, particularly when they first open up. As the flower ages, its colors start to fade a little bit. The yellow splashes are not that yellow anymore, they're kind of pale, but for about a week or a week and a half when it opens, it looks spectacular. Also, to improve the yellow splashes, this orchid should be kept in intermediate conditions, not very warm. I always had better blooms display in colder seasons rather than the summertime, the hot season. This orchid does not have a fragrance, I don't know if I mentioned it, and the bloom display can be quite nice. At some point I think I had 5 flowers on a flower spike. Considering stress and everything, right now I have 2 flower spikes, but I can definitely do with that. This orchid produced a cane that for the first time it did not bloom ever since I got it, but in normal conditions each pseudobulb that is created has the possibility to bloom, and this orchid can bloom multiple times a year, so it's not one-year bloomer. It grows pretty fast compared to other Cattleya orchids, but don't imagine cats eat them fast. Other than that, I find it a really beautiful addition to any grow space, particularly if it's tiny, if you have space issues. This orchid doesn't grow tall, it's not super top heavy, and it can reward you with intermediate-sized, really beautifully colored blooms that are not fragrant but are definitely pretty. This year it would appear that the blooms are lasting a lot longer than in other years, maybe because of the temperature, because right now it's winter, temperatures are not very high. The colors stayed on pretty decently, but it's coming to an end and the flowers are starting to become pale. Nevertheless, beautiful addition to any collection. Now, my pride and joy and the most anticipated bloom of this month was, of course, the Epicalyia René Marquez that I did a video on recently. It is still in bloom, of course, and the flowers are just gorgeous. They have this wild shape to them and these really intense colors. Out of all the orchids that I had in bloom this month, I think this has the most intense colors. Well, maybe the Hawaiian Splash Leia is a little bit more intense when it blooms, but this one, such a beautiful orchid. Now again, this orchid does not have a fragrance, sadly. If it would have a fragrance, it would be perfect, but other than that, I just find it to be absolutely spectacular. Now, of course, this is a preference and not all people will find it so beautiful and amazing and so on. But for me, it ticks quite a few boxes. It has wildness, it has different colors on it, and the colors are vivid. They're not pale in any way. The combination of colors is really beautiful. You don't have a color, let's say a pink that goes into a fader pink or so on. No, you have a proper striking yellow, proper striking magenta, and proper striking green. How weird is that? Usually green flowers are not so striking. They can be quite pale, but not this one. So for all intents and purposes, this is the perfect orchid for me, minus fragrance. If it had a fragrance, I would be over the moon right now. But I do love it quite a lot. And I do intend to purchase one of its parents, which is the Epidendrum pseudopidendrum. It has a little bit of a different color to it. The lip is totally different. The magenta is not so magenta, and if I ever get the chance to have them both in bloom at the same time, it would make for a great video. Other than that, it's just as easy as a Cattleya. Usually epidendrums, or these types of epidendrums, are pretty similar to Cattleyas in care, light requirements, and temperature and so on, and even in humidity. This orchid is not a humidity lover necessarily. It is a warm grower and it can do very well in a home as well. And now for the purchases. I didn't have quite a lot of purchases, but at the beginning of the month I did find quite a few orchids to have and to hold. And first of all, the Nelly Eilers, and I'm happy to say I found both the red Nelly Eiler and the orange Nelly Eiler. Right now the colors are pretty faded. You can see the most recent flower is the more vivid one, and as the flower ages it kind of loses its color, but still it is very fragrant. My greenhouse still smells like the Nelly Eiler. Both of these have the same fragrance and the same intensity. One of them is just slightly orange. And of course the Nelly Eiler still remains my favorite orchid. I am very curious to see if there will ever be another orchid dethroning it. The René Marquez came close, but no, still the Nelly Eiler is the queen. Now, together with the Nelly Eiler, I also purchased a Bartley Schwartz. It is the typical variety, the more red variety. I do love this orchid, even though it's just so common. It has a beautiful fragrance to me. Pretty mild, smells like a sort of artificial candy, but I do enjoy it. I also enjoy how vigorous and big and bushy this orchid can get and how easy it can bloom. And since I lost mine, I decided to purchase it once again. Another purchase this month was the Phalaenopsis Malibu Madonna, and what do you know, she's still in bloom. lost all of her buds except one. As I was telling you, this orchid suffered a shock, a temperature shock most probably in the store, but the flower spike is still growing. It started to develop more buds, and I'm just gonna let it be because it is the season for this orchid. I'm now making her go off season, so there's no point in cutting the flower spike. I do kind of like to forcibly season the Phalaenopsis, force them to grow vegetatively if they're off season, but this one I'm just gonna let it be. It is a beautiful plant. I love the flowers. They're very, very straight. Not the best display this year. I don't like this display, but next year she will definitely be pendant. Not fragrant, but definitely quite beautiful. And the last orchid that I purchased this month was a Bellara that sadly I am missing the name of. Shame on me. I always forget the name of this orchid, but of course you have it in the description. It is a beautiful Bellara. Color-wise, it's not striking. Not something you want to write home about. It is pretty pale. It has quite a lot of white, which is good because I do enjoy white. And the flowers are massive. They're pretty much as big as my palm, and it just makes for a lovely display. Fragrant-wise, again, not something you would write home about, particularly because it smells like pepper or spices. And I know some people do have an issue with this fragrance. I don't have an issue. It's just not my favorite. Display overall, it looks beautiful. I am a sucker for white flowers, whether they're tiny in great numbers or they're really big and flashy. So thank you guys for watching this video. Remember, you have the names of all of these orchids in the description below. If you're interested how they're spelled and you want to Google them, just check the description down below. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for daily orchid and plants videos. And also don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye! So you won't believe this, but a few days ago it snowed a little bit. And in the nighttime, temperature got very close to zero. Therefore, my nobly typed dendrobiums came in the greenhouse. I decided to let them on the terrace since temperature was okay, but we just had such a cold spell, which is so weird. And as far as I understand, it's not very common. It didn't happen in quite a few years. But yeah, they had to come in the greenhouse, but it's okay. I'm just gonna keep them here probably until they bloom because they're already full of buds, both on old canes and on new canes. How about that? Nobly flowers this spring.